Before Sunrise. Wow, okay, yeah, I seriously need to gush about this movie for a bit. If you've ever been on Tumblr or the film-centric side of Instagram, there's a good chance that you've probably heard of Before Sunrise, or at the very least that you've seen the same handful of quotes and clips from it or its two sequels. But if you haven't, here's an itty-bitty primer for you. The series is a collection of day-in-the-life scenes where we follow two people through the various stages of their relationship. The first film is basically an extended meet-cute where Ethan Hawke's Jesse and Julie Delpy's Celine cross paths on a train headed for Vienna and then decide to hop off and explore the city together. The second film picks up around 10 years later and has them continuing their chat after seeing each other for the first time since that fateful day in the 90s, and the third film finds them yet another 10 or so years in the future after having gotten married and having kids together. It's great stuff with plenty of simple and ponderous dialogue, wonderful cinematography of several gorgeous European cities, and is basically director Richard Linklater's take on an Eric Rohmer film, down to him more or less copying the ending sequence from The Green Ray in Before Midnight Wholesale. But you probably already knew that, and I'm not here to review the movie today. Honestly, I don't see much point in even trying to since it's such a well-regarded and known picture already. Rather than waste your time here with the same tired commentary on the film that everyone else has shared over the years, I thought I'd try and do something different. During my last rewatch of the first movie, I picked up on a tiny detail that tickled my brain. It's a small beat that happens towards the end of the film, and either intentionally or through some subterfuge of writer Richard Linklater or Kim Krzan's subconsciouses, basically serves as a metaphor that summarizes the movie. Before Sunrise is one of my favorite movies of all time. I literally check it out like once or twice a year. I own the Criterion box set for the series, and I even have the first two movies transcribed into a paperback. And seeing as we're talking about Richard Linklater, a man whose work is often more about evoking a vibe or feeling than it is telling a story, I thought it'd be fun to dust off this channel and just sorta go with the flow. It's been like 3.5 years since I've sat down to make a video essay about a movie, and I was feeling a bit nostalgic. Plus, who knows, maybe this will be so much fun that it won't be a one-off for me and I'll just keep doing it whenever I have something to talk about. Anyway, enough of this introductory crap, let's just dive into things. By the time the moment happens, Jesse and Celine are essentially broke after spending the day being oh so iconic. They've explored the city, made out, and then they've explored the city and made out some more, but don't quite want to call it a night yet. So, in a last-ditch effort to keep the party going, they stumble into a bar with the intention of procuring some alcohol. While Celine heads to a table to steal a pair of glasses for them, Jesse hangs back to chat with the barkeep. It's a relatively straightforward moment. The two of them talk, and Jesse tries to convince the man that he'll reimburse the place for a bottle of wine, so long as he's kind enough to write down the bar's address for him so that he could do it once he's back in America. There's seemingly no subtext between the characters, and the framing is extremely simple. It's basically just a medium and a medium full shot with Celine alone in the reverse angle. Nothing about any of this tells you that it's important or that you should be paying much attention. In fact, this scene is little more than a bridge between a sequence where Jesse and Celine are talking about how they'll never see each other again, and a second sequence where they finally make love to each other. And yet, something oh so wonderful and valuable happens here. The bartender actually gives Jesse the bottle. Yeah, I know how stupid that sounds, but bear with me. Bear with me. From the opening scene on the train, we're introduced to the idea that European servers lack customer service skills.
You know what? Not service-oriented.
It's something that's just espoused in a passing comment by Jesse when him and Celine are in the dining car, so you'd naturally brush it off as a nothing burger comment, but it strangely comes up again halfway through the film, only this time being said by a random American as opposed to Jesse himself.
I really think this is a civilization in decline. Look at the service. I mean, where is the waitress? In New York, this person would be out of a job.
This is really random and somewhat interesting because once you factor in the bar scene, the idea gets explored 3 times as a triplet, and each instance of it occurs in a different act. Even more interesting, the way it resolves has Jesse not only getting the wine, but having a memorable and wholesome experience with the bartender in the process. It's a nice detail, and it somehow shows progression for him within the context of the story. Even more interesting, the bartender never actually gives Jesse the place's address. He just sorta hands the wine over and watches as Jesse goes to Celine with a smile on his face. And let's be honest for a second, the guy isn't stupid. He's well aware that Jesse's never gonna pay for the wine, he just doesn't care. Heck, the dude even laughingly says that he's giving it to Jesse so that he could have the greatest night of his life.
For the greatest night in your life.
But what does it mean? Like, how does this sequence, which hardly has enough meat on its bones to be called anything more than a sonnet, encapsulate Before Sunrise? Without even diving into what wine often represents within storytelling, such as happiness, the intricate and messy nature of human existence, and excess and release, the scene is important because Before Sunrise is all about the little moments in life. Much as Linklater's earlier efforts, Slacker and Dazed and Confused went out of their way to capture the beats in a day of the life of bohemians and high schoolers in Austin, Texas respectively, Sunrise is about the many building blocks of attraction between two people. It isn't actually about relationships in so much that Jesse and Celine have only just met, but rather the reasons why they should pursue one with each other. For crying out loud, it's called Before Sunrise. Before meaning before, and sunrise meaning prior to the sun having risen. It's about the prelude to a relationship, and if we do want to use the symbolism of wine to look at the sequence, it's all about inhibition. The previous scene shows Jesse and Celine vowing not to stay in touch with each other because of how messy it would be.
I mean, it's not so bad if tonight is our only night, right? People always exchange phone numbers, addresses, they end up writing once, calling each other once or twice.
Right, fizzles out.
And the sequence that follows the bar scene has them setting their vow up to fail by sleeping together. If they really didn't want to stay in touch, they wouldn't have slept together because sex, coupled with the heavily romantic slant of their time together, implies getting attached to one another and wanting more than they agreed to, which is something they make explicit in the closing moments of the film.
Listen, you know all this bullshit we're talking about not seeing each other again? I don't want to do that.
I don't want to do that either.
You don't either?
I was waiting for you to say it.
Why didn't you say something?
I was afraid maybe you didn't want to see me.
All right, well, listen, what do you want to do?
So little moments like the bar scene are vital because it pushes them towards that ending. Furthermore, it also just tells us something about the characters. In the beginning of the movie, when Jesse made the original comment, he was trying to appear smart in front of Celine. From his perspective, he had just met a beautiful and worldly French woman who looks like Julie Delpy in her 20s and doesn't come with the baggage of trying to cuckold her husband like she did in 3 Colors White. The dude is in full manic pixie dream boy mode, and he's even slightly on the defensive because he's more of a fish out of water than she is.
I knew you were American. And of course you don't speak any other language, right?
Yeah, I get it. So I'm the crude, dumb, vulgar American who doesn't speak any other languages, who has no culture, right?
As for the second time the idea gets floated around, it's in the second act after they've already gotten to know each other. They've already kissed, told each other their life story, and made googly eyes at each other at a record shop. They're comfortable together, and the comment resurfaces as dialogue from a random American to contrast who Jesse was at the beginning of the film with who he is to Celine now. This is even backed up by how Jesse tries to speak a tiny bit of French to Celine despite saying he's terrible at it way back when they were in the train car.
Ça va bien, et toi?
Il m'est arrivé quelque chose d'incroyable.
I've been working on my English recently. You want to talk in English just for laughs?
Yeah, okay. That's a good idea.
It doesn't necessarily go well for the guy, but as opposed to last time when he was the butt of a joke from her about it, he plays it off with a joke of his own. There is a playfulness to the exchange now, and it shows that they're connecting. Additionally, it doesn't stop them from continuing to have great chemistry and exchange some great dialogue.
I like to feel his eyes on me when I look away. He kind of kisses like an adolescent. It's so cute.
What?
And by the third time we explore the idea of service in Europe, the bar sequence, the idea doesn't even need to be explicitly stated. More than that, the concept is turned on its heel because the bartender turned out to be a total bro after all. While Celine was off riding some dude's motorcycle or whatever, Jesse was having the personable conversation he more or less claimed he would never get from a server in Europe. It's a logical conclusion to a simple idea that represents his arc as a character. He started the movie as a guy with a broken heart who didn't want to talk to anybody and just get the hell out of the continent, and he's now met a woman that, as the sequels will later show, he spends the rest of his life with. According to Celine, Jesse's major character flaw in the movie is that he's a tryhard who always wants to be the center of attention and be the smartest guy in the room.
I kind of didn't really like this reaction back at the palm reader. You were like this rooster prick.
Rooster prick?
Yeah.
What the hell was a rooster prick?
You were like a little boy whining because all the attention wasn't focused on him.
He was an unplanned pregnancy that was made woefully aware of it while his parents were fighting when he was a kid, and by his own description, that shaped the way he thinks. In the scene he's explaining this to Celine, he goes on to say that he tries to view life as something of his own doing, and that he feels like he's crashing a big party by just being alive. But his actions feel as though they repeatedly betray the romantic slant of his words. There's a scene in a Ferris wheel where he tries to ask Celine to kiss him, but chickens out until she says it for him. When they encounter a fortune teller, he's dismissive of her reading and sorta ruins the vibe. Similarly, he tries to poke holes in a poem that a seemingly homeless guy wrote for them. He may be literally crashing the party in these instances, but he isn't doing it in a way that's particularly life-affirming. It's only during the bar sonnet that he fully realizes what he told Celine at the amusement park for the first time since asking her to join him in Vienna. And somewhat interestingly, this also happens to be an instance of them doing something non-transactional. Those 3 examples I just mentioned were all related to money, as in order to get on the Ferris wheel, they probably had to pay to get into the amusement park. Celine had to pay the fortune teller to get their reading, and they both paid the poet for his words. There were other activities they did that were free in the movie too, such as visiting a cemetery or just wandering around a record store, but this bar scene is different because of how it's a revocation of using capital. In case you've forgotten, wine costs money, and the gesture of him not having to pay for it speaks volumes to the nature of Jesse and Celine's relationship. It's saying that these characters click, and that the nature of their connection transcends things of monetary value. Celine didn't get off the train with him because he promised her an exciting night on the town, nor did she stick around because he took her to fancy restaurants or out shopping. They had a genuine spark that was enough for them to want to spend time together, and that spark also happened to help Jesse gain some utility as a person after his breakup in Madrid. Another instance that just so happened to have involved him crashing a party that he could tell he wasn't wanted at.
She pretty much managed to avoid being alone with me for the first couple days we were there, and I stuck around for a while just to kind of let it really sink in that she wished I hadn't come.
By handing Jesse the bottle, the bartender is more or less giving him the agency he needs as a character to host his own exclusive party. One where him and Celine are basically the only people in a black void and can consummate the connection they've felt to each other in a single doing of the act that neither of them will ever forget.
We had sex twice, you idiot.
Sorry, twice. That bar scene is so wonderful. It's almost as if the film is telling us to be a little spontaneous and to shoot our shot because preconceived notions or assumptions aren't always on the money. It captures the conflict of the movie, which is that these 2 people only have tonight to be together, and it reminds us that Jesse's impromptu decision to ask her to join him is the only reason that it happened. Likewise, the only reason him and Celine likely slept together was because they got the wine. If they didn't, they may not have slept together, and if they didn't sleep together, they may not have had the courage to make plans to meet again. And sure, Celine does say that she thinks she wanted to sleep with him from the moment they got off the train together, but it still took stopping at a bar and then stopping at a second bar for the wine for that to happen.
I think I had decided I wanted to sleep with you when we got off the train.
All of this was the result of happenstance and taking a chance. To borrow a phrase uttered in another Ethan Hawke vehicle, it's all about carpe diem.
The Latin term for that sentiment is carpe diem. Now, who knows what that means? That to seize the day.
For such a small moment that's sandwiched between two very important scenes in the movie, this bar sequence is such a load-bearing beat. The entire final chunk of the film is more or less dependent on it happening, and as I just outlined in this video, you can read a ton of subtext into it if you really want to. There's something to be said about how well constructed a movie has to be for something like that to happen. Even if I'm completely out of my mind and overthinking this, you've got to admit that it would be kinda hard not to. So many little things line up and connect to each other for it not to work as a microcosm of the movie, regardless of whether or not any of that was intended. In other words, and for all the curtains are blue people out there, it isn't important if any of this was done on purpose. Being able to read additional text into a work of art is an important step in trying to connect with and interpret it, because even if the curtains are literally just blue, they can paradoxically encompass more than that. Anyway, that's all I really had in the tank for today. What do you think of the scene? Am I out of my mind and need to stop before I give myself a nosebleed, or is there really something to all of this? Let me know in the comments, and also maybe tell me what you've been watching. What's your top 5 for 2023? Yeah, I'd love to know. Like I said at the top of this video, I might actually start posting on this channel again, and it may come in the form of vlog impressions on movies I just seen, whether they're new or old, or just, more fun one-off video essays where I take a specific moment in a movie and overanalyze it until my head hurts and I need to go to the hospital. So if you enjoyed the video and that stuff sounds like it may be up your alley, just maybe subscribe to the channel or whatever, You could also check out my movie and TV podcast, Media Obscura. It's on a hiatus right now, but if you enjoy the comments I made during this or the humor, yeah, it's more of that, and I am planning on bringing it back in the near future. You could also totally check out my novel Guppy Falls 2 if you'd like. It's a romantic comedy coming-of-age YA friends to lovers story, and it's basically American Graffiti meets Dazed and Confused, Scott Pilgrim, and Adventureland. If any of that sounds even remotely interesting to you, you could read it for free on Kindle Unlimited, and the link is in the description. So yeah, bye!
Your pole stars, don't forget. When the stars exploded billions of years ago,